artists, and especially talented actors, bear within themselves deeply rooted and often unconscious desire for transformation. Speaking our theatrical language, desire for characterization.
When Michael Chejov recorded these talks on theater and the art of acting for his master classes, they were attended by professional actors who were already acquainted with the fundamentals of the Chejov technique. In the companion booklet, you will find an outline of many of these techniques. In this first lecture, Michael Chejov discusses 4 simple and often amusing means which lead to the mastery of characterization. And in the latter part of side 2, he explores the actor's ability to transform himself by utilizing the mask of the character, which the actor creates and then wears upon the stage or screen. Michael Chejov often referred to members of his master classes and to all talented actors as his colleagues. So, fellow colleague, his words, as pertinent today as they were when first spoken in 1955, are offered to inspire and enrich you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and good friends, let us discuss tonight the problem of characterization on the stage. But first, permit me to make a following statement. Every true artist, and especially talented actors, bear within themselves deeply rooted and often unconscious desire for transformation. Speaking our theatrical language, desire for characterization. This is my statement. Later on we'll come back to it. I'll try to explain it and give the deeper meaning of it and justify it. As there are no equal people in life, so there are no equal characters on the stage. We must distinguish between different types of people or characters on the stage and particular individual characters within these types. These are never the same, never equal. They are different. One is apt, for instance, to play always a type of a tough guy, or let's say a seductive leading lady, or an absent-minded professor, or a bitchy woman, or, I don't know, an irresistible young girl with long, long eyelashes and slightly parted lips, and so on and so on. Those are types of characters. But each particular tough guy or a bitch woman are different variations within these types. They are individual, and each of them must be interpreted and played differently. That is where the characterization belongs. With other words, the types which we always play are given us by nature, but each individual character we get from the playwright. And that is what we have to create ourselves, each time anew, each time giving it a different characteristic feature. Even the slightest characterization, a mere hint of it, is already transformation. Now let us see what happens to our best, the most talented actors when they do not want to distinguish between the type and the individual character. They always play the type only, but not the character. They always play their own nature, but not the variations within this nature. By doing so, they are compelled to play always themselves as they are in life. It is as if a painter would always paint a self-portrait and another self-portrait and another self-portrait. And that is what they call to play their parts straight. And now try to look with open eyes, without any prejudice, and see what happens at the end to such actors. Their talents, their acting begins to degenerate. Once upon a time, their first self-portrait, the very first one, was perhaps interesting, attractive, full of life, expressive, and entirely new for themselves and for the spectators. And now the voices are heard. Ah, what a personality this actor has. What a charming, unique personality. Aha, says the actor to himself. I have a charming personality. All right, let them have it. I'll give it to them. And since that unfortunate time, the actor begins to repeat himself, his own acting. He begins to imitate his own performance of yesterday, of the day before yesterday, and so on and so forth. Poor man, he doesn't even realize that through these constant imitations of himself, his once charming personality begins to wither, to become stale. He accumulates within himself a number of all sorts of cliches, bad theatrical habits, worn-out mannerisms, and even banalities. And he begins to feel that he loses the contact with his own talent. He has no more access to it. And now he is bored to death with his own profession and himself. But you can stop me and ask, how does it happen, for instance, that a ham actor or ham actors so often, I would say too often, become a star? But dear friends, this is quite a different problem. We might call it a problem of human destiny, and it doesn't concern us here at all. At least not tonight. And so the actor who fills himself with empty shells and dead forms needs some kind of remedy. Such a remedy which will be able to dissolve all what became stale, stiff, and petrified in his artistic nature. And now, my good friends, I'm going to suggest to you 4 simple and rather amusing means of finding and assuming the characterization. One of these means is the following one. As soon as you get more or less familiar with your character, try to compare it with yourself. Ask 3 questions. The first one, what is the difference between my way of thinking and the character's way of thinking? That means, what is the difference between his mind and my own mind? You might discover, for instance, that the character is thinking much faster, or perhaps much slower than you, or perhaps the process of thinking of the character is more passionate than your way of thinking. Or perhaps you will find that you form and shape and chisel your thought with greater clarity and precision than your character, which might be a very vague thinker. The more differences you will find between your mind and the mind of your character, the clearer, the more distinct you will begin to understand what your character is. That means what characterization concerning the mind you will need while studying and later on performing your character. And then try to find the difference between the feelings and emotions of your character and yourself. In this case, you might discover, for instance, that you are rather passionate, easily inflammable, that you are inclined to love and to forgive people, and so on. Whereas, in contrast to you, your character might appear cool and cold, never losing his temper, and is inclined to accuse people around him. And then investigate the same way the nature of your will and the will of your character. Your will might be strong, unbending, whereas the will of your character might be weak and feeble. Perhaps you pursue your aims with great insistence, persistence, and never give in, but your character perhaps loses and forgets his aims and purposes and objectives long before he is able to achieve them. Accumulate and write down all the differences you were able to discover between you and your character in these 3 spheres: the mind, feelings, and will impulses. Consider these differences as characteristic features of the character you are working upon. And now, with these differences in mind, or rather in the back of your mind, go over your entire part, speaking the lines or perhaps only whispering them, imagining or actually doing your business, and you will notice that very gently and gradually the characteristic features of the part will creep into your performance. But please do not force the result. Do not toil. Just do it easily, playfully. Then the result will come by itself. By going this way through your entire part, don't try to keep in mind all the differences at once. Take them one by one. I don't think I hardly need to mention that by using this gentle and subtle means of assuming your characterization, you still remain within the frames of the type which you always represent on the stage. But you are going through the transformation That is the point of it. Let me tell you now something about another way for finding and assuming the characterization. Begin with making observations of people around you. It is obvious, of course, that every individual, every person is different from another person. That's quite clear. And we might describe to ourselves in so and so many words where the difference lies. But I want to suggest to you, my friends, to define this difference without using any word, purely artistically, as it were, using rather our creative imagination than the words. How can it be done? Very easily, and perhaps with great amusement and humor too. And by the way, the more humor, light, and ease comes into our work, the better. The secret of such kind of observation is the following one. Everyone, according to his general character, to his main psychological qualities and peculiarities, is, if I may express myself this way, is centralized within himself. Our imagination can easily find where this center sits within this or that person. Let's take a few examples and then the idea will become clearer. You observe, for instance, a person who is selfish and conceited, and you ask yourself where the center of his entire being is located. And your creative imagination might lead you to the discovery that his conceit and snobbishness built a warm and cozy nest for themselves in one of his slightly raised eyebrows, or in his protruding jaw, or hardly noticeable frozen wry smile permanently lingering on his lips, or perhaps in the lower part of his spine, which makes him feel superior, especially if he strains slightly the spot in his spine. All these places, all these spots, that is what we might call the center, imaginary center of his being. Another example. You observe a man, or rather a woman, who is highly inquisitive and nosy. And you see that her center sits right in the tip of her nose, or one of her eyes, or in one of her ears. You might also find the center in the back of her neck, which gives her the tendency to walk with her head thrust forward, so that she, God preserve, will not miss anything which is going on around her. One more example. There is a noble, quiet man before you, without any specific characterization. Has he a center? Yes, he has. Where might it be? Let us say, right within his chest. But our imaginary center might be also located somewhere without the body of the character. You observe, for instance, a person whose main characteristics is cowardice. In this case, your imagination might show you his center located without his bodily form, as if hanging in the air, somewhere beneath his, pardon my expression, beneath his hint part, his seat. Or there is a warm, truly loving person who is always possessed by the desire to do something good for somebody else. His center might be easily imagined within other people, within people whom this person loves. The same thing might happen to the character who is full of hatred. His center can be very easily found in somebody else whom he wants to destroy. Or imagine a strong, willful, active, and even aggressive man. He wouldn't be able, perhaps, to keep his center within himself. It will jump out of his body. It will, like a phantom, cling to all kind of events and business going on around him. There is another thing concerning the center which I want to suggest to you. Each center, wherever it might be located, must have certain definite qualities. The center can be big or small, dark or shining, warm or cold, crispy and dry, or soft and gentle. It might be aggressive or calm and tranquil. Your creative imagination is free to endow each center with different qualities according to the character. The center of our nosy woman might appear, for instance, before your mind's eye in a form resembling a needle, a cold and hard needle, whereas the center of our truly loving person can be imagined as a big, shining, warm sun. Our creative imagination cannot and should not be restricted or limited by making its choice while working upon the form or qualities of the different centers. Furthermore, every center can be either static or movable. If, for instance, the center of our snobbish and conceited man is easier to imagine as a static one, it is undoubtedly better to see the centers of our nosy woman or our hateful man or our aggressive man as constantly moving, shifting, restless centers. I am sure, my friends, that you can easily see that the center serves at once the type which you always representing on the stage, your emploi, as it were, and each particular character within the frames of the type. The same way you made the observation of people around you, observe the characters from different plays. A little practice and exercising will give you very soon sufficient skill to use this center in your professional work. Never ask anybody whether your idea about the center is right or correct. Use your own judgment. Trust your intuition, your imagination, your talent. Of course, you might take into consideration your director's suggestion and alter your idea, your conception of the center. But there is no need to doubt your own judgment. If, for instance, the center you found satisfies you or amuses you, then be sure it is correct. Besides, I can see the center in this or that particular person or character my way, the other will see it his way. It is a creative work. There are no mathematical or logical approach to it. Create it and see that you are happy. That's all what is needed. May I remind you once more, please do not toil with this center. Take it just as simply as it is. Enjoy it, play with it, like a child would play with its ball. Okay? Now to the third means of transformation or characterization. We might call it the play, the game with the imaginary body. The technique of using the imaginary body is very similar to that which we discussed while speaking about the imaginary center. By studying your character, or even by the first reading of the play, your intuition gives you a certain idea, perhaps at first very vague one, but still some idea of what the character might be. And now, at once, try to do the following thing. Try to imagine what kind of a body your character might have. Soon, or perhaps even immediately, you will see that the body of your character, I mean imaginary body of your character, is different from yours. Observe this body for a while and then just step right into this body so that your actual body and the imaginary body will meet in the same space. What will be the psychological result of such a meeting? Again, let's use some examples. Let's say that your intuition prompted to you that the body of the character is slightly taller than your own. Now, being within this imaginary body, what will you feel? You will feel that this being slightly taller than you are in reality, you inevitably change your psychology. You will behave and speak and move like a person slightly taller than you are. And that will happen by itself. You will not and do not need to force yourself to speak differently or to move differently and so on. It will just happen by itself because you are within this imaginary body which is taller than your own. Or imagine that this body is shorter or heavier, or it is rather plump, or it's stooping, and so on and so forth. And each time try to obey, as it were, to this body. Try to listen to your own psychology. What happens within you? What happens with your psychology and even with your physical body if you trust this imaginary body into which you just stepped in? The imaginary body has a tremendous influence upon our psychology and our actual physical body. It is good to realize that in this game with this imaginary body, we have actually three elements. One is the character. Another is the imaginary body. And the third is your own body. The imaginary body is, as it were, right between the character and yourself. That is why this body can so easily and so fully influence you with your psychology and your physical body and transform you into the character. It would be wrong, of course, if you would neglect this imaginary body and try to force yourself to become the character without this imaginary body which is between you and your character. That would not be an artistic work. It would be just a toil, a painful toil. It is a great difference, my friends, whether you force your psychology and your body to transform into the character, or it happens as it were by itself. Let your imaginary body do this work for you. Do not toil, do not make any unnecessary efforts, rely upon your imaginary body and it will transform you into the character easily and with great artistic pleasure which you will feel. You will be satisfied that something within you, meaning this imaginary body, does this work for you, and you only enjoy the result of it. Make a series of experiments with the different imaginary bodies, and perhaps you will start loving it, and then you will see how useful, how practical and practicable this body might be in our professional work. You don't need always to imagine the whole body of your character. Sometimes it is enough if you imagine only a part of it. For instance, let's say you imagine a neck of your character longer and thinner than your own. What might be the result? That you might feel that you are, as it were, constantly on the alert. And this is already the psychology of your character. You transformed your entire psychology by using only an image of a neck of your character. Or imagine then, for instance, the arms of your character are longer than yours and legs are shorter than yours. It is very possible that you will feel suddenly very awkward. Or see, for instance, the nose, the imaginary nose of your character turned up. You might get the sensation of certain lightheadedness, superficial attitude toward life, or perhaps a mischievous quality will come into your psychology. You might use the center and the imaginary body simultaneously, or you might use them separately. There are no rules about it. It depends entirely upon your free will and your artistic taste. The fourth means of transformation or characterization is perhaps the simplest of all. Although, to say the truth, the previous ones were simple enough too. Of course, if you will exercise and practice them. Anyway, this means requires that you make a list of business which your character is going to fulfill from the beginning to the very end, in the proper sequence. Important business as well as seemingly unimportant. Even all the entrances and exits, you're sitting down or getting up, or just turning your head to the right or to the left, or just throwing a glance at your partner, or sitting quietly and listening to what your partner is saying to you, and so on. When your list of business is ready, start to fulfill this business, step by step, in the right, proper sequence. You've got some idea about your character, and even the vague idea of it is enough to begin your work with this business. And now your whole interest must be concentrated on how you fulfill this business. How is important. There are two sides to this how. Your character and the given circumstances for each particular business. Let's say, for instance, you are sitting quietly there on the stage, reading a book, and then you hear the doorbell rings. You get up, go to the door and open it. Your friend enters and you greet him heartily. You fulfill this same business several times until you begin to discover how your character will do it, meaning what characterization might creep into your business. This is one thing. And another, how this characterization must be done in the given circumstances. I mean, quietly sitting, reading the book, and then being excited and happy that your friend came to see you. Similar business might be acquired by the script several times, but each time this getting up and opening the door will be naturally fulfilled in different circumstances. Although the character remains the same, but the circumstances and the mood of the character certainly will be different in each particular case. What do you achieve by repeating the same business several times? First of all, slowly and gradually, you will discover the way, the how your character fulfills this or that business. That means you will get more and more familiar with the characterization of your role. This will be your main achievement. Another achievement will be your ability to preserve the same characterization in different circumstances. Moreover, by looking for your characterization this way, by elaborating it, you inevitably get more and more familiar with your character as a whole. You will make many new discoveries in your character. You will dig deeper and deeper into the character. And finally, you will get to the very core, to the very heart and the essence of your character, and the miracle might happen. You might suddenly discover, well, I'm ready to play the whole part. It is already within me with all its characterization. I am ready in the shortest possible time, without any toil and painful thinking and preparation and so on and so forth. Although in this fourth way of transformation or characterization suggested by me, you are concerned with the business mainly. But it should not become a kind of pantomime. To avoid this danger, you will have to combine your business with lines. Not all the lines which are given to you by the writer, perhaps few words, few lines, and if you don't know them by heart, use your own words, similar to that which you find in the script. You are not at all obliged to speak them loudly, using your full voice. You might whisper them or even think them. That will be enough. The pantomime will be killed. May I remind you once more that while suggesting to play each part as a character part, I never meant that the characterization or transformation must be so strong, so obvious or overdone that the actor himself will not be even recognized anymore by the spectator. No, Gary Cooper must not be drowned into this characterization. Gary Cooper must remain always Gary Cooper as the type which he represents, with very gentle and very subtle characterization for each particular part within his type. Each characterization has two sides to it. One is purely psychological one, and another is physical, as it were, bodily. For instance, I'm going to play an absent-minded professor. Absent-mindedness is purely psychological side of it. But it must find its way to express itself also physically. I might find some movements or some position of my head or the way of looking strangely and absent-mindedly, so that psychological absent-mindedness will find its physical outer way of being expressed and showed to the audience. You might consider it as a general rule for all kinds of characterizations, however subtle and gentle it might be. So far, we were able to discuss 4 means for finding and acquiring the characterization. While applying them in your professional work, you might use one of them or 2, or all of them, or or none. It's up to you.